You're listening to the God Life Culture Podcast, where faith
and what's trending collide. Welcome back to the latest episode of the God Life Culture Podcast. This is Eddie.
What's up, everyone? This is Miguel, and we are so thankful that you are tuned in for another episode of the God Life Culture Podcast. We want to remind you, if you have not subscribed, to hit that subscribe button so you can be notified when we drop a new episode. We are thankful for all of our new subscribers and all of you who have come on this podcast journey with us throughout the weeks. Those of you who are catching up on our previous episodes, we just want to say thank you so much for tuning in and for supporting. And also, if you could leave us that rating and that review wherever you listen to your podcast, we would greatly appreciate it. Eddie, how are you feeling today?
Today, I am recovering from allergies. You know, we've been speaking about that it's springtime and everybody's looking forward to the great weather, but with spring comes the pollen, the tree pollen, the flower pollens, all the different type of pollens. And every year, without fail, I get a really heavy panic attack. Excuse me. Panic attack. I get really bad allergy attacks, and it hits me like if I got the flu or something. So if you hear me a little like I don't know, like I sound like a frog or something, or if you hear me coughing in the background, I am recovering from allergies. But beside that, everything is great. My family's great. I am here. I am alive. Another opportunity that God has given me of life, and you know that's where I'm at the moment. Where are you?
Yeah, everything is good. We are enjoying the beautiful weather. It has been really nice out these last few days here in New York. We're getting a taste of summer, a change of season. The school year's winding down. Our birthdays are approaching in just a few weeks. So that's exciting. We have to figure out something cool to do on the podcast for like our birthday. Some type of something, you know?
Yeah, I agree.
But definitely it's all good, and we're just excited to be, I'm excited to be back here. And, we have another special guest with us today that we're very excited to dive into this conversation, with her.
Yeah, so we want to take this opportunity to welcome to the God Life Culture Podcast, Destiny Marko. Destiny, please say hello to our listeners.
What's up, guys? How are y'all? I'm so excited to be here. So honored whenever anybody says, hey, we want to talk to you for a minute. We want to interview you. We want to chat with you. I'm like, me, little old me, a little girl from the hood, Bronx, New York. I never thought that.
BX.
BX stand up all day, every day. I'm proud, okay? I'm proud. But I never thought that I would ever be asked to do any of this kind of stuff. So to be asked is such a blessing. It's such an honor to be used by the Lord. So here we are. I'm excited, guys.
Yes, thank you. And, something that we always like to do, because we have been doing a lot of guests on our podcast, and we always like to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. You already said a little bit about it already. You grew up in the hood, BX, the Bronx. But if you had to introduce yourself, how would you introduce yourself? Who is Destiny Marko?
Well, I just moved, so my introduction, I feel like wouldn't be exactly who I am, more like who I am currently. But if I would introduce myself, I would say, hello, my name is Destiny Marko. I am from Houston, Texas. Well, living in Houston, Texas, from New York, Bronx, New York. I am 26. I'm going to be 27 this year. I have a beautiful son who's 2.5 years old and an amazing husband named Andrew Marko.
Nice.
Nice, Destiny. Now, you mentioned a whole lot, so we're going to definitely dive into, a little bit about your music ministry, your family as well. But we always like to start, with your church background and your upbringing, right? So, we know you through your music and all of the things that you are doing now as a worship leader. But again, what was your church life like growing up as a child? Were you singing in church from very little? Were you exposed to all of this, ministry life from very young? What was your experience like?
My church experience as a kid. So I grew up in a very strict Pentecostal church, which I'm Puerto Rican. So I think that a lot of my fellow Puerto Ricans or Dominicans or just Hispanics in general can say, oh, yeah, I grew up in the same kind of church, especially living in New York.
Yes.
back in the day, like I said, I'm in my mid 20s. So back when I was going to church as a kid, that was really the center focus of churches in New York City was the Pentecostal church. And I think that I could speak for a lot of us in my age group and who are Christian today. Growing up in New York, that was the church. You went to church, and it was either Pentecostal or Catholic. And I was raised in a Pentecostal home. My grandmother was Pentecostal, so we were brought up in that. And I would say I was very shy when it came to singing. I do have recently a new memory that my mom kind of reminded me of, that when I was like 3 or 4, she was at like un evento de damas. Everything was like damas or caballeros, like everything was
Right.
separated back then. And she was at some damas event, and she's like, the pastora me dio el micrófono. She gave me the microphone, and she was like, we want you to sing today because we always hear your little voice singing from the back and whatever. And I started singing apparently at that age. That's not something that I really remembered, but my mom told me they had to yank that microphone back from me because I was not letting it go. And I just know myself now, so I can picture myself as a 3-year-old, like, you ain't getting this mic back, ma'am, so don't even try. So that was really cool. But yes, I was singing as a kid, and then I kind of stopped. I became like a preteen and a teen, and I kind of wasn't really singing in church much.
Okay. And now, I know that a lot of times when we talk about our upbringing as, being in Pentecostal churches and Spanish churches, we've had a few guests that have that similar background. There are experiences that we go through, whether it's things like church hurt or expectations that we had that weren't
Oh yeah.
met and things like that, things that we saw that, we may not have liked. Is there anything that you can say that maybe contributed to the person that you are today, something that kind of maybe inspired you or pushed you and kind of helped you become and mold who you are today?
That's a great question, honestly. And you know what I love about that question? First of all, I've never been asked that question, which I think is so important. Um, to kind of acknowledge a place. It's almost like therapy, so to speak. You get asked a question that you're like, man, that's a really good question. And I think yeah, I've growing up in the Pentecostal church, and I don't want to offend anybody with saying anything about the Pentecostal church, because listen, you will worship God how you please, and everybody to each his own, so to speak. I'm no longer in the Pentecostal church. I'm in a non-denominational church. But I feel like there were, especially as a kid, there were a lot of cliques when I was going to church. So that goes back to that church hurt thing, like if you weren't in the clique, or you weren't like part of all the pastor's kids crew, you weren't cool. Or if you weren't part of the kids who, do XYZ, you weren't like part of the cool clique. And so growing up when I was 9, 10, 11, 12, I did like to sing, but I was never invited to sing with all of the other kids, because all the other kids that were singing were all the worship leaders' children and the dance ministry, their children, and all of the people who had somewhat of a spotlight or a name, so to speak. So I wasn't ever like invited to sing with the children's choir. I wasn't ever invited to sing with, the teen choir. And I feel like that really turned me into who I am today, because I've become a very accepting person. I've become a very open person. Like, people will write to me from another country and they're like, me encanta tu música, me encanta oír tu música. Like, and I don't ghost them. I don't leave them in my request messages box and never answer them. Like, I treat them like I've known them for years. I treat them like they're my friend that I just met, like either today or I met 15 years ago. I think that has made me feel like, it hurts when someone doesn't accept you. And it's really important to just say, you know what? You may not be from my quote unquote clique, but I want to be friends with you. I think you could be really awesome in my life, or I feel like I could pour into you. And I think that definitely comes from that church hurt for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I love what you said. The fact that, growing up, you probably, you struggled with being accepted, right? And struggled with that. But, in turn, you kind of didn't operate or live your life, out of that place of hurt, right? Where instead,
Absolutely.
you are now accepting, right? And you have that in mind. And I think that's
Mhm.
great because I think ultimately that's how we create change, right? I think a lot of times it's
Absolutely.
easy to identify all of the things that we don't like and identify all the things that may bother us, but
Sure.
it's hard to really bring solutions to the table sometimes, right? And have that change of attitude and change of heart. So I love what you said about being accepting of those individuals who now reach out to you who may struggle, right? And may be feeling those same things.
Yep.
So definitely, I think that's something that's awesome. I mean, just recently, not too long ago, you released a new single called Mi Universo, which in Spanish, in English, it's My Universe. And,
Yep.
that's where kind of I was introduced to your music, right? I think
That's
she,
awesome.
a fellow friend, Anna Grace, had posted about your song that was coming out, and I remember clicking on that post and checking out your music and just being like, oh snap, okay, another fellow worshiper, another person that's worshiping God and putting their stuff out there.
Yeah.
So that song, that latest single, Mi Universo, what was the inspiration behind that song?
I just feel like, man, I could say so much. I could literally talk about that song for days. My friend Javi was the actual author of that song, and I will give credit where it's due any day. I write better in English. I think in English, so I think secondly in Spanish, which makes it a little difficult to write. But we were kind of talking about themes and what we wanted to write about and kind of where we wanted to lead the audiences that were listening to this. And I'm like, man, we should just talk about having trying to find this love and trying to fill this void in so many different areas of our lives, and trying to find it in a relationship, trying to find it in validation, trying to find it in just people accepting us, kind of like what I just spoke about, and ultimately finding that love through Jesus, who's the only person who can give us the love that we're wanting. And ultimately, I think that message came from a place where we were like, you know what? Not only do people need to hear this message, but we need to hear this message as believers. We need to hear this message. We need to share this message as people who are sharing music, who are singing, who are doing spoken word, who are doing whatever the case may be in an artistic way for God. But I feel like it came from a place of us needing to hear this message as much as everyone else who was going to be listening to it.
Awesome. On top of, Mi Universo, last year you also released Electrico. How would you say that in English? Electric?
Electric, yeah, I
Electric,
guess
yeah.
Electric,
electric.
right? Electrico, which is definitely a fun song. I love the
Yes,
message behind it as well. And I thought the music video was a fun music video as well. And in this song, you have Ingrid Rosario, who is also
yes.
featured on the song. So can you talk to us a little bit about the song itself, but also the music video and the inspiration behind that?
Absolutely. So the song Electrico, we were like so excited to just do something fun, do something fast. And Ingrid is such a fun person. Her and I became friends about 2 years ago now at this point. The music video, man, I was feeling it was, first of all, it was freezing that day. Like,
Wow.
you watch the video and you see the sun shining and us in like our little jackets and our sweaters, and we don't look cold at all. In between takes, we are shivering. Okay. It was freezing. But I was starting to feel like a little stiff and I wasn't really feeling it. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this music video today. I'm freezing. And Ingrid was like, come on, we got this. Let's go. And she was like, so fun and so energetic. And I feel like she made that video what it was. I just have to be honest.
That's awesome. I mean, I was watching the video last night with my wife, and she was, seeing it for the first time as well, and she loved it. And she basically said that she was like, they seem like they're having so much fun together, and she was
We
like, they
do.
have to be friends. Like they have a chemistry together. They have to be friends. It was
We are
she
friends.
was she someone that even just I guess before meeting her, you looked up to her and kind of followed her music and her ministry.
Oh, absolutely. I've listened to Ingrid again growing up in Spanish Pentecostal church. Ingrid was one of the pioneers of women leading worship. I mean, we had people like Marco and, you know, men who were the primary leaders in Spanish Christian music. But there weren't many women doing it at that time. There were a handful, but I would say that Ingrid was one of those people who paid like paved the way for a lot of women who wanted to do this.
Yeah.
And I think another huge thing that she did was, which was legendary, was that she was starting to translate covers that were, music that was in English, and turning them into Spanish covers of music that was already out for the English community, because there was a lot more music for the English community in that newer style that worship became, than for the Spanish community. A lot of it was alabare, alabare. Like that was the music I was listening to.
Right.
And it wasn't that contemporary CCM style for Spanish. And so I loved that about Ingrid, that she was doing that. And even till this day, like, man, we're friends, but I still look up to her.
That's awesome. And I think it's great because, as part of being believers and in ministry and whatever you do, right? You want to reach people, and you want to cross boundaries and cross limits, and you want to be cross cultural, right? And you want
Sure.
to have your message kind of spread, right? And have different people understand and be be blessed by it. And in this song in particular, you have a little bit of Spanglish going on, where there are certain lines and lyrics that are done in English, the song's mostly in Spanish.
Yeah.
Was that intentional? What was the reason behind throwing in a little bit of English in that song?
I think to do exactly what you said, just to kind of reach a dual audience. I also feel like sometimes, um, the Spanish community is a little underappreciated, so to speak, which is why I started making Spanish music. um I don't want to sound like, I don't want this to be like a controversial thing, but I just feel like sometimes they're given like the leftovers of what the English side of Christian music does. So, oh, Christian music does something that's a little more trappy. All right, let's kind of do it in Spanish and just introduce it to them. And I'm like, why aren't we just giving them the good stuff that we're giving the English culture?
Yeah.
Because they deserve it as well. Like, people in these other countries, they're looking for something different. These young kids, they want to hear a different style. So I'm like, let's go for it. And I just feel like it's really cool. I have friends who speak only Spanish, and it feels almost empowering for them when they're able to say a line in English, or when they learn an English word, or when they learn an English phrase or an English sentence. It makes them feel really good about themselves. So I'm like, how can we make this really cool in terms of them being able to sing a Spanish song, but then make them feel really empowered about themselves, and awesome that they can share this lyric that's in English with some of their other friends who don't speak in English.
Yeah, and another thing is that for a lot of us, especially those that are from, like New York, I grew up in Brooklyn as well.
Yeah,
Spanglish is kind of part of our language as well. Like we can be
absolutely.
having a conversation and, we go in and out of the Spanish. When I'm praying, I go in and out of the Spanish when I'm talking to God. I
Oh
start off in
yeah.
Spanish, go into English, be careful I throw a little French in there as well. It's just that, it's part of our lingo and our language. And when it comes in reference to the Spanish culture, we've had many artists, not many, but we have a lot of artists come on to the podcast that dominate the English language, but have been releasing Spanish music as well.
Sure.
And there is, a growing appreciation for Spanish music.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
there is people are starting to tune in to the fact that when it comes to our culture and our language, and how we express and connect with God in Spanish, there is a uniqueness and a different feeling when it comes to that, and we're seeing a lot more of that as well, which is good. Some people may be like, oh, that's culture appropriation, stay away from us Spanish people.
I
But
know.
when it's accepting, and when it's embracing a culture and also getting the language out there as well. Same thing with the Spanglish, where you're putting English and introducing that, to people that are mostly Spanish speakers as well. It's dual purpose. At the end of the day, what we're trying to do is get the message of God out there. So if you a person that dominates English and Spanish, but God moves you to start incorporating Portuguese into your music, come on, let's do it, because at the
Let's
end of
do
the day,
it.
we're
Yeah,
just trying to reach the masses, and I didn't mean to go into this
absolutely.
whole spiel.
You better go ahead and preach. Ain't nothing wrong with that, okay?
No, I gotta say that I gotta preach tomorrow on Thursday. Let me say that for that.
That's a good message. You better use it.
Switching gears just a little bit, last year, was you were releasing a lot of music last year, which is
Yeah,
good, and we're gonna get into that as well. But last October, you made the surprise announcement that you were releasing your first English single called Fourth Man. And
yeah,
when you posted this new single, and you posted the post on Instagram and on your socials, you shared with everyone that it was inspired by your late father-in-law. Can you
yeah,
please share with us some insight in that song and the process you went through to release it?
absolutely. So I feel like that was my most vulnerable song. I think I would say that because I wrote that song in its entirety. I would say my mother-in-law and my husband helped me with a line or two there, and my father-in-law changed one word in the song, and that was it. I gave him writing credit. How could I not? My father-in-law was battling stage 4 throat cancer. This was his second primary cancer. He had had cancer, 8 years ago, and unfortunately, a second type of cancer came back, which is very rare. Like, you look that up, and it's not common. So
Wow.
he got a second primary cancer, meaning it's a second cancer in his body where it's in a completely different place than the first one. So that's like getting, skin cancer and then all of a sudden getting breast cancer.
Hmm.
That's like completely two different things. And so it was rough on our family. And I think that his body just began to deteriorate a lot faster than we anticipated, which was really difficult because it all happened in less than a year.
Wow.
And so in the very beginning stages of him going through chemo and radiation, just it wasn't working. The chemo that they were trying wasn't working. The radiation wasn't doing anything. If anything, it was causing more pain. It was causing burning of his skin. And it's just, if I get into details, it's gruesome. It's difficult what we had to go through as a family and what he had to go through as an individual.
Yeah.
And I remember one time seeing him struggle, and he was in such a tough place. And I remember saying, Pastor, because he was my pastor, I said, Pastor, how do you act so normal with everything that you're going through? And he goes, have you never read the scripture of the 3 Hebrew boys? God was in that fire no matter what. And and I just was baffled that he was like preaching this message at me to encourage me while he was
Hmm.
going through his own battle. And I
Yeah.
had just learned how to play guitar. And I remembered that story and our conversation. And I picked up that guitar, and I remember just strumming my first chord and saying, there was a fourth man in that fire because he loved them the way he loves us. And those lyrics just began to literally flow. And
Wow.
in a matter of an hour, I wrote that entire song. And I know that it was God. I
Yeah.
know that it was a message that was meant to encourage, even if it was one person, to save one person out there. I knew that that was the purpose of that song.
I love that. I mean, and watching the video and listening to the song, just that opening line is just so powerful as it is. And I'm glad you sang it, right? There was a fourth man in that fire.
Mm.
And, as a visual person, I just picturing that, right? And
Oh, yeah.
picturing, the things that we go through in our life that sometimes we feel like we're alone, right? And sometimes we feel like we're going through these situations by ourselves. We often forget that there is that fourth man in there with us, right? That in our
Absolutely.
situations, we're not alone. Have you ever faced a moment in your life where um in writing a song like that, there was a fourth man in the fire and these lyrics where you are going through something and then you remember, like, I did write this, right? Like, I did write about this feeling, or I did write about this emotion. So you're going through loneliness, let's say, and you're reminded of kind of your own lyrics where it's like, wait a minute, I know God is with me. I know God is in this situation. Is there a moment where you kind of can remember that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it, as ironic as it may seem, I had to remind myself and my husband of those lyrics the day that my father-in-law passed away. I think it was so easy for us to say, God, why our family? Like we've already gone through so much. My husband had lost his grandfather just 4 years prior, and I was just like, why us, you know? And then I was reminded that my father-in-law said that even if it was because he had to be in a hospital bed, sharing the gospel with nurses and with doctors that didn't know who God was right before he passed away, then it was all worth it.
Mhm.
And I'm like, man, someone who could be going through stage 4 throat cancer, this man couldn't speak. When I tell you
Wow.
he had a dry erase marker and a whiteboard, and he was writing to people, Jesus loves you. He was writing to doctors and nurses, I can't speak, but the enemy can't stop my praise. Like, this man was literally writing on a whiteboard and
Wow.
sharing the good news with the people who needed to hear it. Y se me paran los pelos when I talk about that. Like, my hairs are just all up because I can't believe that I had to remind myself of lyrics that God shared with me. And I was fine. I was in perfect health. I was great. I was doing okay. My family was doing well. But the man who was literally laying in a hospital bed, so to speak, literally dying in that bed, was sharing the good news and sharing with me, who was fine, that there was a fourth man in our fire, to not
Yeah.
worry about it. Though that will forever be mind blowing to me.
You know what? And it's great inspiration
Mm.
that, and encouragement to hear. I'm guessing his last name was Marco, Pastor Marco.
Yes, Stefan Marco. Yeah,
Someone like Pastor Marco, who was such a believer and had such a great faith in God, that his circumstance did not deter that faith, did not deter that love, did not deter his mission to be
yeah,
like, you know what, until my last breath, I will find a way, even if I have to blink it in Morse code to someone, to
literally.
share and communicate that Jesus loves you, God is real, and he is here for each and every one of you. So,
Oh
even
yeah.
after his death, that his testimony alone is very encouraging.
Yeah, and
Amen.
I mean 2020 we know was a year that was crazy for everyone, right? And even just, this year we hear stories of people who have lost loved ones and people who, just went through horrible situations, right? And
Yeah,
I noticed that a lot of your music and even your music videos, you released them in 2020, right?
yeah,
In a year where, there was chaos, and in a year where there was just a lot of things going on. What was it like
yep.
for you working on these songs and working on this music while living through a pandemic, being quarantined, and just having all of this, craziness around you?
It was so smooth by the grace of God. I could never, ever, ever, nor would I want to ever take credit for being able to release so much music in 2020. I released my very first single May 1st, 2020, which it just turned a year old a couple days ago. And, we were at the church. Our church had been turned into a food pantry in Queens, New York. We were serving, I can't even, I don't even know how many families a day, probably 700 to 900 families a day. We had given out, at the very couple of months into the pandemic, 10 million pounds of food. That quickly turned into 30 million pounds of food, turned into 50 million pounds of food. Like, the pantry is still open, it's still a thing. And so I would say that definitely freed up a lot of time for me working at the pantry, being able to say, I'm going to focus on sharing the good news. I'm ready. It's time. I've loved to sing for so long, but I was never ready to do this full time, to make it my career, so to speak. And so I was reached out to by an awesome producer named Timbro, who's out in Dallas, Texas. And he was like, hey, we're all in a pandemic, but you want to start making music? And I'm
Mhm.
like, absolutely. And that was even God himself, because Tim and I have so many mutual friends that could have happened at any point before the pandemic.
Yeah.
And so that was God. That's all I have to say about that.
And you know what? We've spoken about our food pantry on this podcast a bunch of times as well. So it's really great to see how a lot of churches took on the the position to not shut away, to not be like, oh, we can't do anything, let's run away from the people, and
Yeah,
really serve their communities. You know, the same thing happened in our church with our food pantry as well, and our food pantry team, you know, where it literally just exploded.
yeah,
And you know, we saw how through the food pantry, you know, we, you know, were able to preach and pray for people, and there was a
absolutely.
lot of people that were going through really tough times, and the food pantry was a place for them to not only get fed physically and get physical food, but so many times, you know, the food pantry leaders will tell us all these testimonies about people that they had to pray for and to encourage, and that they walked away, you know, with not only food but actual like spiritual sustenance, and they were able to
So
make
good.
it to another week as well. So you know, to see how the Church of God has been stepping up in the midst of the pandemic, and then to also see how God is just so crazy and great that, you know, in the midst of all of that, he also gives us opportunity to grow in ministry as well. You know, it's all great things. And you know, we're very, you know, sometimes we get a little weary about sharing good news about stuff that happened in
Yeah,
2020 because other people maybe had a little bit more rough. But it is important to give those testimonies about God's faithfulness and how great he was, and how he did continue to bless people, and he did continue to open doors and opportunities, you know, for people as well.
absolutely. It
In the
can, you never know, it could encourage someone who's feeling down about that year to say, you know what, there is a God, and even though he didn't do it for me, he did it for someone else, and I believe in his
Yes.
promises.
Absolutely. And you know, we when we started, before we went on live to record, you know, you were like, "Oh, sorry if you can hear my son in the background." And you know, I was sharing, yeah, listen, I know you're paid because I have a 4-year old and I also have a 1-year old. And having children's is a blessing, but sometimes they find the worst opportunities to be little rowdy boys. But
Oh
you know,
yeah.
you do find yourself, you know, in a position where, you know, you're a worshiper. You know, your music ministry is, you know, growing and growing and growing. You know, you're also a wife or mom. You know,
Yeah.
what advice could we give, you know, to maybe a mom that's out there or a dad that's out there where they want to, you know, be able to maintain a balance between being successful in their ministry but also being a successful husband, wife, mom, or dad?
I think my biggest encouragement would be um, having the support of your spouse is huge. I think starting by sharing your visions and your goals with your spouse, if you're
Yeah.
married, because everyone's not married, and I understand that. But sharing even that vision with your mom or your dad or whoever you live with, your roommate, having some kind of backing and support is always like one of the best seeds to plant for a successful ministry to grow, you know? I would also say like sharing whatever it is that you do with those people immediately around you. Like our son is only 2.5, but he like literally will go on the phone and want to watch my music videos, will want to hear my music, will like dance when he listens to Electrico or Nada.
Hmm.
Nada is his favorite song and his favorite music video, but he'll like look for it, you know? And I feel like because I've included him in that, he feels part of it. Even though
Yeah.
he's young and he's little, kids know. They know what's happening around them. They know what's going on, you know, and I think just treating them as though they're part of your life too is really important in every aspect of your life. Because I feel like we can say, oh, he's 2.5, he's 3, he's 4, he doesn't know what's going on, but they're like little sponges and they absorb everything you show them and you do around them. And if you show them that you're worshiping God and that you're doing this ministry, even if it's outside of the four walls of the church, they're going to be affected by that. And just worshiping with them, singing with them, sharing, you know, who Jesus is with them, even though you think they don't understand, read them a children's Bible book, like stuff like that. I think that that could really would be my advice, including your entire family, your immediate family, whoever you live with, in what you're doing is such a great way to do ministry and not feel like you're doing it alone.
Yeah, and I also think that it also makes them part of the process, you know, because there
Absolutely.
are things, you know, they're not going to be up there with you singing, maybe, or maybe they won't be
Mm-hmm.
part of the music video itself. But when
Mm-hmm.
they're part of the process, you know, it's that much more easier for them to understand the work that goes into it as well. And they're even that much more happy when the blessings and how, you know, when success starts to happen, they're like, yeah, we're part of that too. Like, you
Yep.
know, we're a
Yep.
part of that one way or another. That's our blessing, you know, just like it is mom's blessing, you know, as
Absolutely.
well. And I agree agree. And when it comes to children, when it comes to our boys, every night we pray together. We read them the children's book, Bible as
Hmm.
well, and we introduce them, to who Jesus is, who God is, what does the love of God do, because it is important that you do that, like you said, because they're sponges. The
Oh
same
yeah.
way that they, these kids pick up the latest TikTok trend or the latest dance or the
Hmm.
latest this or whatever, they will also pick that up as well. And I think that a lot of times parents make the mistake of thinking, oh, they're too young, they're too young. When they get older, we'll talk to them about God and introduce them. And it's like, no, B, by then it's already too late. Like, you have to do it,
Exactly.
from a very young age, so that they themselves, begin to develop that curiosity with who is God, and why is it that people go in when it's worship time and they start crying. Let me lift my hands too and see if I start
Yep.
crying,
Yep.
as
Yep.
well. So it is very important to do that and to introduce that to our children.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and Destiny, you are active on social media. If you're not following Destiny on social media, later she'll give you all of her information. But on Instagram yesterday, you posted a question and you asked your followers who you should collaborate with.
Yeah.
And you were posting some of the responses that you've received, and there was like a plethora of people. I mean, from like Torrin Wells to Danny Goki to Christine DeClario, all the way to Lucia Parker. And we actually saw that Lucia Parker responded and shared it as well, basically saying like,
Let's get this
yeah.
done.
Like, let's go.
So if you had to collaborate, I mean, I know all of those people they're all amazing artists and worshipers, but who are those people that like you kind of have on your list that you're like, man, like I really, really want a collaboration with this person?
Okay, so first of all, that was like a super dope, surreal moment. I love Lucia. I have always loved her voice. I've loved her voice for a long time. And to see that she kind of responded and then we kind of DM'd afterwards, outside of obviously sharing posts on our stories. And we were like, let's do it. Let's meet up, like let's write together. Let's do it. So that was super dope. But I would say she's definitely one of the people on that list. I would say a few more people on, and this is in no particular order, people on that list that people kind of encouraged me to do a song with would definitely be Blanca. I love Blanca. I cannot
Yeah.
stress that enough. I listen to that new album that she just put out every day. I love her
Yeah.
voice. I love her vibe. She's super like she's saucy. I don't know how to
Yeah,
explain it.
and
She's so dope.
she's another person that is also pushing those barriers and
Yes.
pushing the
Yes.
limits, and that was kind of those what do you call it, assumptions, right, that people have when it comes to Christian artists and Latin Christian
Absolutely.
artists. So I think she's doing a really good job at being out of the box, being
Hmm.
creative, and
Couldn't agree
not
more.
trying to be, yeah, not trying to be another, Christine DeClario, right? Which, nothing against her, but just, people
No,
sometimes like to copy, right? And they emulate these people, and they just feel like,
absolutely.
I'm gonna copy their style, I'm gonna copy their flow, and in whatever field, right? So I
Hmm.
think that she's doing an excellent job at that.
I agree. I think that's why I've taken to her music so beautifully because I've literally been able to listen to it. And sometimes, and maybe this is going to rub some people the wrong way, but not even realize I'm bopping to Christian music. Like, I
Yep.
love that. I
Yeah.
love that I can take the average person who just loves music in general that's not necessarily Christian and play them my music and they can say, "What? I'm putting this on my Spotify playlist because this is vibey. This is popping. Like this is dope. I love to dance to, or bop or whatever like when I do my makeup or do my hair or get ready for a photo shoot and I'm having people so encouraged and wanting to listen to my music who are not even believers, guys.
Yeah.
That to me is huge. And those are the people that we're trying to reach. I mean, yeah, let's reach the people who are already saved, but they're already saved. They know where they're going to end up. Let's start reaching out to the people who don't know who Jesus is. And if that's through music like my style or like Blanca's style, or these people who are not necessarily saying God or Dios or Jesus or Jesus in their music, let's do it.
Yeah. I love that. And again, I'm recently with all of these new releases within music and all of that, it seems like we are headed in that direction, and just there is so much variety to choose from, right? You have your Maverick City for those who like that feel. You have,
Yep.
people like you said, like Blanca. You have people like, Redimidos or Alex Zurdo, right? And there's a plethora to choose from. We have Danny Goki collaborating with Christine DeClario,
Yep.
and even Danny Goki collaborating with Corinne Hawthorne, people just coming together, right, to work on music and release music. I think it is powerful for our culture right now, for our people to see, these collaborations and see just the power that lies when you come together with your gifts, right, and kind of
Mm-hmm.
leave the
Yep.
entitlement to the side and leave, all of those things to the side. Great things can happen. So,
Absolutely.
Destiny, I believe that you are part of that as well. And your music and your vibe and everything that you're putting out there is not in vain. And we want people to find you, on social media and find your music. So can you just let us know where our listeners can find you on social media and find your music?
Absolutely. So my music can be found on Spotify, iTunes, Apple Music, Deezer, basically any music platform. You can find it on anything as Destiny, Destiny, Marko, Marko. There's a little mess up with Amazon Music. Don't ask. I can't get them to fix it. But it's Destiny Marks, Marks. I don't have any idea why they don't fix it for me, but you can still find it there if you're an Amazon Music kind of person. And then on Instagram, I am my most active, even more so than Facebook. You can find me at literally the at sign Destiny, Destiny, Marko, Marko music. So that would all be one word, no spaces. Destiny Marko music. You can find me on Facebook as Destiny Marko. Basically anything Destiny Marko.
Awesome. So we want to thank you, Destiny, for being on our podcast, being a guest. We know that our listeners received from this episode. We know that they were blessed and edified by everything that you shared. And we just pray that God continue to open doors for your ministry and continue to
Amen.
allow you to reach people and create even more opportunities for you to just impact this generation.
Amen. Amen. Thank you guys so much. I pray the same thing for you guys because even doing this is so encouraging to so many people. And so I'm even grateful to be part of this. So thank you guys so, so much.
Of course. Thank you. And followers, be sure to, tune in to whatever she has going on by logging into her social media, definitely hitting that follow button, streaming her music, wherever you stream your music, be sure to support, right? And as well, be sure to follow our podcast on Instagram at God Life Culture Podcast. Hit that subscribe button wherever you are listening to us right now. And if you haven't left a review or rating, take a few seconds and do that at this time. We would appreciate it so very much.
So, Destiny, once again, we just want to thank you for taking your time to be with us and to have this awesome conversation about your music, about your relationship with God, and all the great things that you're looking to do and just expand and to grow. And we hope to hear that Lucia Parker collaboration very soon, also with Blanca and everybody else that was on your list that we didn't get to hear either. I'm gonna leave it as a surprise so that when I see the new music with the new features come out, I'll be like, oh, that's the other person that was on her list. And to our listeners, as always, we like to support people. Let's also support our Christian people as well. So download her music, follow her on her socials. If you're an Amazon Music person, like she said, it's Marks. Rate the music, like it, but also tell Amazon to fix that too. Let's make some noise for her so that she can get the proper representation that she deserves. So once again, I want to thank you guys for listening to the God Life Culture podcast. That's God Life Culture. Until next time.
See ya.
Bye.